Hello, everybody. It's Vaultboyhunter, Sam, um, doing the third episode of the set review show. Today, we're going to be looking back into the annals of Magic history at Antiquities, the second expansion in Magic, the fifth set released overall in Magic. It was released March the 4th of 1994. Scaphalias, Jim Lynn, Joel Mick. Looks like those were the design team that anybody would probably know of. No new keywords or abilities. It was the original artifacts set. Actually, every card in the set either said artifact or had somewhere on the card, even if it's just in the flavor text, there was artifact. It's the first set in history to have cards with multiple artworks. It introduced the Urza lands, and the Urza lands, of course, have always had multiple different arts. It also had Urza's Mine, Mishra's Factory had 3 different arts, Strip Mine had 3 different arts. Strip Mine actually had 4 different arts, one at common. So a lot of common or pauper cubes will play Strip Mine. And Mishra's Factory because they were originally misprinted into the common slot. So it's kind of an oddball distribution. It's 85 cards, but it's really like 100 cards because of all those extra arts and all of that. So this kind of explains the story of the Brothers' War that plunges the world into the Ice Age. Flavor-wise, story-wise. Let's see, interesting misprints or anything like that. Nah, just a couple of misspelled names. Reconstruction was printed without a mana symbol. So, let's see. Notable cards. Workshop, of course. Candelabro, Twanos, Millstone, Mishra's Factory, Strip Mine, and the Urza lands are the big cards out of it. So that's it as far as kind of trivia or any of that type of stuff. I have my notepad up to take down anything that I think I might want to add to a power cube. So we're kind of building it as we go through. First card, Argivian Archaeologist. So a 1/1 for 2 white and a colorless. And then 2 white and tap. Return target artifact from your graveyard to your hand. There's better options. There's lands that do that, or just sacrifice lands and such. So I do really like the old white mana symbol, but I can see why they wanted to make it a little more thematic. So next up, Argavian Blacksmith. A 2/2 for 2 white and a colorless. Tap, prevent the next 2 damage that we deal to a target artifact creature this turn. So, not great. Artifact ward. So this is a part of the overall ward cycle, but for artifacts. And a few sets later. So enchant creature. Enchanted creature can't be blocked by artifact creatures. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to enchanted creature by artifact sorcerers. And then enchanted creature can't be the target of abilities from artifact sources. So basically just protection from artifacts at this point. So next up is the Circle of Protection that had not been printed. Circle of Protection Artifacts. Oh yeah. And Circle of Protection Artifacts is kind of the odd card out because it's a white and a colorless, but it's 2 to prevent the next damage, 2 instead of 1. So they try to balance a card that I don't really think saw it. I didn't see any play while I was playing. So Damping Field, white and 2 colorless. Players can't untap more than 1 artifact during their untap steps. So I guess that would be useful, but again, I only printed this one time. Next up is Martyrs of Corliss. So a 1/6 for 3 colorless and 2 white. As long as Martyrs of Corliss isn't tapped, all damage that would be dealt to you by artifacts is dealt to Martyrs of Corliss instead. And of course, I'm going to read the Oracle text on that because the printed text is like 3.5 paragraphs long. And nobody got time for that, or whatever the new way of saying that you're not going to take that extra time to fully do your due diligence is. And then the last white card is Reverse Polarity. So it's 2 white for an instant. The art on it is not good. I mean, I don't understand. So you gain X life, where X is twice the damage dealt to you so far this turn by artifacts. So I think we can just go ahead and say that's a wet fart noise and keep on going. Okay, so the first blue card is Drachnaw's Restoration. For a blue, it's a sorcery. Return any number of target artifact cards from target player's graveyard to the top of his or her library in any order. I do believe there's better versions of that out there. Next up is Energy Flux, blue and 2 colorless. This one's actually not bad. All artifacts at the beginning of your upkeep, sacrifice this artifact unless you play 2. So I think that might see play in some of the older artifact heavy formats. Next up is Hurkyl's Recall. Hurkyl's Recall, blue and a colorless. Return all artifact target players owns to his or her hand. It's an instant. And this, I do believe, sees play. Yeah, it was reprinted in Modern Masters 2015. It would see play in Modern, I believe, if Robots was as big of a deck as it could be. I just think Robots is kind of, it's tier 1, but it's Friends tier 1, I believe. It might be tier 1.5. So, but if it ever becomes a real like threat, people will play the Recall a lot more often. Next up is Power Artifact, 2 blue, Enchantment Aura, Enchant Artifact. Enchanted Artifacts abilities cost 2 less to activate. This effect can't reduce the amount of mana an ability costs to activate to less than 1 mana. Like, if it could just make it 0, but it can't. Okay, so Reconstruction, as you can see, no expansion symbol. So blue, sorcery, return target artifact card from your graveyard to your hand. So it's a one-shot, but cheaper than the other option. Next up is Sage of Latnam. So blue and a colorless, a 1/2. It was a common, and it got reprinted as a rare. So tap, sacrifice an artifact, draw a card. Okay, and then the last blue card is Transmute Artifacts for 2 blue. It's a sorcery. Sacrifice an artifact. If you do, search your library for an artifact card. If that card's converted mana cost is less than or equal to the sacrifice artifact's converted mana cost, put it onto the battlefield. If it's greater, you may pay X, where X is the difference. If you do, put it onto the battlefield. If you don't, put it into its owner's graveyard, then shuffle your library. So I guess get one that's less is the moral of that story. Or play Tinker. Okay, next up, Artifact Possession. First black card. So this is the set probably where black has the most interaction with artifacts, and that was just the theme of the set. Black and 2 colorless, Enchantment Aura. Whenever an enchanted artifact becomes tapped, or a player activates an ability of enchanted artifact without tapping its activation cost, Artifact Possession deals 2 damage to the artifact's controller. All that talking this for 2 damage. Okay, next up, Gate to Phyrexia. So Gate to Phyrexia set up the whole messy Phyrexian nonsense backstory. Tired of it. Okay, black, enchantment, sacrifice a creature, destroy target artifact. Activate this ability only during your upkeep and only once each turn. So reusable artifact destruction, kind of. Next up, Daunting Wind. I can make a fart joke. I'm not going to. Okay, Haunting Wind. Sorry. Black and 3 colorless enchantment. Whenever an artifact becomes tapped or a player activates an artifact's ability without tapping it in its activation cost, Haunting Wind deals 1 damage to that artifact's controller. No, sir. Next up, Phyrexian Gremlins. Black and 2 colorless. It's a 1/1 creature. You may choose not to untap Phyrexian Gremlins during your untap step, and then tap target artifact it doesn't untap during its controller's untap step for as long as Phyrexian Gremlins remains tapped. Not good. Gross. Moving on. Priest of Yawgmoth. Black and a colorless. Sacrifice an artifact. Add to your mana pool an amount of black equal to the sacrifice artifact's converted mana cost. I'd rather play Cthulhu Rebirth. Next up, Zenic Poltergeist. So 2 black and a colorless for a 1/1 creature. Tap until your next upkeep. Target non-creature artifact becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. That is entirely Blue's realm. Now, and then the last black card is Yawgmoth Demon. So 2 black and 4 colorless, flying, 6/6. First strike. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may sacrifice an artifact. If you don't, tap Yawgmoth Demon, and it deals 2 damage to you. So by this point, they weren't having the creature deal full power to you anymore, but still. Okay, next up, first red card, Artifact Blast. So it's like a blue Elemental Blast or Elemental Blast. Red, instant, counter target artifact spell. Not great. Atogs next. You know him, you love him, you feed him artifacts, he wins games for you. Red and a colorless, so 1/2 for sacrifice an artifact. Atog gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Mr. Smiley, Dr. Teeth, whatever you want to call him. Next up is Detonate, red and a colorless for a sorcery. Destroy target artifact with converted cost X. It can't be regenerated. Detonate deals X damage to the artifact's controller. Not bad. Not great, not bad. Next up, Dwarven Weaponsmith. Red and a colorless for a 1/1 Dwarf Artificer. Tap, sacrifice an artifact, put a 1/1 counter on target creature, activate this ability only during your upkeep. Don't understand all the upkeep nonsense, but that's fine. Next up, Goblin Artisans, red and just red, sorry. And then it's a 1/1 creature. Flip a coin. If you win the flip, draw a card. If you lose the flip, counter target artifact spell you control that isn't the target of an ability from another creature named Goblin Artisan. Does it? But if you... Wait. Why would you do that in response to playing an artifact? Okay, moving on. If I have to ask that question, it's not playable. Next up, Orcish Mechanics. A 1/1 for red and 2 colorless. Tap, sacrifice an artifact. Orcish Mechanics deals 2 damage to target creature or player. I like that. It's good flavor. And then the last red card is Shatterstorm. Wrath of Artifact God. Okay, 2 red and 2 colorless. Sorcery, destroy all artifacts. They can't be regenerated. No, sir. Okay. So that's the last red card. Going over to green. Our Gothian Pixies. It's a 2/1 2/1 creature for green and a colorless. Our Gothian Pixies can't be blocked by artifact creatures. Prevent all damage that would be dealt to our Gothian Pixies by artifact creatures. Kind of almost protection from artifacts. Our Gothian Treefolk. It is a 3/5 creature for 2 green and 3 colorless. And it has that same idea, prevent all damage that would be dealt to our Gothian Treefolk by artifact sources. But it doesn't have the unblockability, so a little less sin. protection from artifacts. Next up, Sentinel Druid. It is a 1/1 human druid for green and a colorless. Whenever an opponent casts an artifact spell, put a 1/1 counter on Sentinel Druid. That's not bad. Limited. They're not playing artifacts. It's pretty expensive for a 1/1. Crumble. Green instant. Destroy target artifact. It can't be regenerated. That artifact's controller gains life equal to its converted mana cost. Better options out there. Gaia's Avenger, 2 green and a colorless for a. It's basically an XX with a +1/+1. So it's always a 1/1. And then Gaia's Avenger's power and toughness are equal to +1 plus the number of artifacts you control. So it's not the easiest way to word that, but whatever. Next green card is Power Leech for 2 green. Whenever artifact an opponent controls becomes tapped, or an opponent activates an ability without tapping in its activation cost, you gain 1 life. All that to gain 1 life. Okay. And the last green card is Titania Song. So it's an enchantment, green and 3 colorless. Each non-creature artifact loses all abilities and becomes an artifact creature with power and toughness equal to its converted mana cost. A Titania Song leaves the battlefield. This effect continues until the end of turn. Yeah. Okay. So over to artifacts, and I think for the most part, outside of like the Urza lands, we're gonna be pretty much into artifacts for the remainder. So Amulet of Krug, 2 colorless, 2 in tap. Prevent the next 1 damage that we deal to a target creature or player this turn. Okay. Armageddon Clock, 6 for an artifact. At the beginning of your upkeep, put a Doom counter on Armageddon Clock. At the beginning of your draw step, Armageddon Clock deals damage equal to the number of Doom counters to each player. And then 4, remove a Doom counter from Armageddon Clock. Any player may pay this ability, but only during any upkeep. Boo. Okay. Ashnod's Altar, 3 for an artifact. Sacrifice a creature, add 2 to your mana pool. Okay. Ashnod's Battle Gear, 2. You may choose not to untap Ashnod's Battle Gear during your untap step. 2 in tap. Target creature you control gets +2/-2 for as long as Ashnod's Battle Gear remains tapped. So kind of an early version of equipment. Early. Years and years before. Ashnod's Transmogrant, 1 tap. Sacrifice Ashnod's Transmogrant. Put a 1/1 counter on target non-artifact creature. That creature becomes an artifact in addition to its other types. I remember loving that card for whatever crazy reason. Okay. Next up is Battering Rams. Battering Ram, 2 for a 1/1 creature. At the beginning of combat on your turn, Battering Ram gains banding until end of combat. Whenever Battering Ram becomes blocked by a wall, destroy that wall at the end of combat. Okay, moving on. Bronze Tablet, 6. Remove a Bronze Tablet from your deck before playing if you're not playing for Anti. Bronze Tablet enters the battlefield tapped. This better have an amazing ability. And 4 in tap. Exile Bronze Tablet and target non-token permanent an opponent owns. That player may pay 10 life. If he or she does, put Bronze Tablet into its owner's graveyard. Otherwise, that player owns Bronze Tablet and you own the other exiled card. It's a lot of mana. Okay. Candelabra of Twanos. 1 X tap, untap X target lands. So definitely a good ramp strategy there. Clay Statue, 4. It's for a 3/1 artifact creature. 2 regenerate Clay Statue. Clockwork Aven, 5. mana for a 0/4 flying creature. It enters the battlefield with 4+1/+0 counters on it. At the end of combat, if it attacked or blocked, you remove a +1/+0 counter. And then it has X tap, put X +1/+0 counters on Clockwork Aven. It can't be more than 4, and you can only activate it during your upkeep. Colossus of Sardia, 9 to cast, a 9/9 with trample. It doesn't untap during your untap step, but you can pay 9 during your upkeep to untap it. So, Coral Helm, 3. 3, discard a card at random. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Okay, Cursed Rack is next, so 4 to cast. As Cursed Rack enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. That chosen player's maximum hand size is 4. So it takes away some cards, but it's probably too slow for a casting cost. Next up, Dragon Engine. I love the art on that. Not that it's great, but it's cinematics and I really like that. Dragon Engine, 3 to cast, 1/3 artifact creature, and then it's got 2. Dragon Engine gets +1/+0 until end of turn. So because it's an artifact, you have to pay more than just normal old fire breathing. Felden's Cane, artifact costs 1. Tap, exile Felden's Cane. Shuffle your graveyard into your library. So a reshuffle effect. Next up is a Gothian Silex, 4 for an artifact, 1 and tap. Each non-token permanent originally printed in the Antiquities expansion is sacrificed by its controller. So that's the set hoser. Next up, Grape Shop Catapult, 4 and then tap. For a 2/3 creature, Grape Shop Catapult deals 1 damage to target creature with flying. Not great, not bad, just is. Next up, Ivory Tower, 1 to cast. At the beginning of your upkeep, you gain X life, where X is the number of cards in your hand to -4. So anything over 4, you gain a life. Really not bad. Good with Necro and Library of Alexandria. So, next up is Jolem Tome, 3 with 2 and tap. Draw a card, then discard a card. So looting, expensive looting, but looting. Okay. Next up is Mightstone, 4 for an artifact. Attacking creatures gain +1/+0. Next up is Millstone, 2 and tap. Target player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into their graveyard. Mishra's Factory is next, and there are 4 different printings. This is fall. I'm pretty sure this is fall. Let's see. That's summer, fall, that's winter, and that is spring. Or that's spring and that's summer. I always get them mixed up, but it's a land. You can tap it to add 1 colorless to your mana pool, and then you can tap 1, and Mishra's Factory becomes a 2/2 assembly worker artifact creature until end of turn. It's still a land. And you can tap a assembly worker, or you can tap it to give an assembly worker +1/+1 until end of turn. Arguably, and I think without a doubt, the best man land ever printed. I mean, it's just a great man land. So it would go in. Definitely go in. So, okay. Next up is Mishra's War Machine. So it says 7 casting cost, Juggernaut, and it's a 5/5 creature. It has banding, and during your at the beginning of your upkeep, Mishra's War Machine deals 3 damage to you unless you discard a card. If Mishra's War Machine deals damage to you this way, tap it. Wow. For a 7 casting cost creature. Okay, moving on. Mishra's Workshop. The land version of Black Lotus. Tap, Add 3 colorless to your mana pool. Spend this mana only to cast artifact spells. Of course, that would go in. Because it's very similar to Bazaar of Baghdad, where it can fuel an entire deck archetype just entirely by itself. So next up is Obelisk of Undoing, so 1 to cast. 6 in tap, return target permanent you own and control to your hand. This is pre-boomerang, so maybe you had to be that desperate, but that doesn't feel good. Next up is Onliet. So it's a 2/2 for 3, colorless mana, of course. When Onliet dies, you gain 2 life. Next up is Ornithopter, 0/2 flying for 0. Primal Clay is next. It's 4 for an XX creature. When it enters the battlefield, it becomes your choice of a 3/3 artifact creature, a 2/2 artifact creature with flying, or a 1/6 wall artifact creature with defender. So you can pick whichever one is most relevant for you at the time. Next up is Racolite. So 6 casting cost, 2. Prevent the next 1 damage that would be dealt to target creature or player this turn. Return Racolite to its owner's hand at the beginning of the next end step. You can display a circle of protection and get around having to do a whole bunch of those extra steps. So. Next up, Rocket Launcher, 4, and then 2 to activate. Rocket Launcher deals 1 damage to target creature or player. Destroy Rocket Launcher at the beginning of the next end step. Activate this ability only if you controlled Rocket Launcher continuously since the beginning of your most recent turn. So it has Summoning Sickness. Next up, Shapeshifter, 6 to cast. It is a X/7X. As Shapeshifter enters the battlefield, choose a number between 0 and 7. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may choose a number between 0 and 7. Shapeshifter's power is equal to the last chosen number, and its toughness is equal to the 7 minus that number. So basically, you get 7 between the power and the toughness to use however you want. Wow, that's complicated as hell. Okay, next up is Staff of Zegon. So 4 and then 3 in tap. Target creature gets -2, -0 until end of turn. Wall of Ith wasn't that far away from this set, I'm just saying. Next up is Strip Mine. Again, this one had a whole bunch of different arts with different aspects of the Strip Mine. Strip Mine is just a really good card. It's a land. You can tap it for 1 colorless mana, or tap to sacrifice. You tap and sacrifice it to destroy target land. So, good card. So we'll add that to the cube and carry on. Next up is Suchi, 4 to cast for a 4/4 artifact creature. When it dies, you add 4 mana to your mana pool. That was in Vintage Masters as an uncommon. I think it was pretty well drafted. So, next up is Tablet of Epitry. So 1, whenever an artifact you control is put into the graveyard from the battlefield, you may pay 1 if you do gain 1 life. So it's kind of like an artifact Lucky Charm, not great. Next up is Talnos' Coffin. For 4, you may choose not to untap Talnos' Coffin during your untap step. 3, tap, excel target creature, and all R is attached to it. Note the number and kind of counters that were on that creature. So basically it's the Oubliette effect. So you get the counters and the aura is reattached to it when it comes back into play, if it comes back into play. Next up is Talnos' 1/4 with 2 in tap. Target creature with power 2 or less can't be blocked this turn. I think there were some earlier creatures that could do that for far less. Next up is Talnos' Weaponry. So 2, you may choose not to untap Talnos' Weaponry during your untap step. And then 2 tap, target creature gets +1/+1 for as long as Talonus's weaponry remains tapped. So again, kind of an early predecessor of equipment. Next up is Tetravis 6 for a 1/1 flying creature. It does enter the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it, so it can never be less than a 1/1, but it can be as much as a 4/4. And at the beginning of your upkeep, you may remove any number of 1/1 counters from Tetravis. If you do put that many 1/1 colorless Tetravite artifact creature tokens onto the battlefield, they each have flying, and this creature can't be enchanted, because why not? At the beginning of your upkeep, you may exile any number of tokens put onto the battlefield with Tetravis if you do put that many 1/1 counters on Tetravis. Excellent. Next up is the Rack. 1 casting cost for an artifact. As the Rack enters the battlefield, choose an opponent. At the beginning of the chosen player's upkeep, the Rack deals X damage to that creature or player, where X is 3 minus the number of cards in his or her hand. So it's like Black Vice, but the reverse. Next up is Triskelion. 6 to cast. It's a 1/1, but it does enter the battlefield with 3 1/1 counters on it, so it can be as much as a 4/4, but never less than a 1/1. And then remove it +1/+1 counter from Triskelion. Triskelion deals 1 damage to target creature or player. I think there's an updated version of him with flying or something that's just a lot better. That's used in some infinite combos. So. Next up is Urza's Avenger, 6 to cast for a 4/4. Has a 0 activated ability. Urza's Avenger gets -1/-1 against your choice of banding, flying, first strike, trample until end of turn. So I wanted to have flying, first strike, and trample. Okay, well it's a 1/1. Okay. Urza's Chalice. 1 casting cost. Whenever a player casts an artifact spell, you may pay 1 if you do gain 1 life. So it's definitely a lucky charm. Okay, and then Urza's Mine is next. Tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. If you have Urza's Mine, Urza's Tower, and Urza's Power Plant in play, at the same time, tap to add 2 colorless mana to your mana pool. Next up is Urza's Miter. 3 to cast. Whenever an artifact you control is put into a graveyard from the battlefield, if it wasn't sacrificed, you may pay 3 and draw a card. Urza's Power Plant is next. Exactly the same as Urza's Mine. Tap to add 1 colorless mana to your mana pool. If you have Urza's Mine, Tower, and Power Plant in play at the same time, you tap to add 2. And then the big daddy of the bunch is Urza's Tower, which reads tap to add 1 colorless to your mana pool. If you have Urza's Mine, Tower, and Power Plant in play at the same time, tap to add 3 colorless mana to your mana pool. So with the 3 in play, you can quite often have 7 colorless mana to use to abuse your opponent, and that's why I love Tron. Next up, Wall of Spears. It's a 2/3, 3 casting cost creature with Defender. Has first strike. Next up is Weakstone, 4 casting cost, and all attacking creatures get -1/-0, and it's got like a crazy little dog thing on it. Sorry, Justin Hampton, that your career with Wizards of the Coast wasn't longer. And the last card in Antiquities is Yotain Soldier. So that's 3 to cast. It's a 1/4 vigilance creature. So I always liked that art because it looked like he was a bug or something. But that is it. I think there was a limited amount of cards that we would add here. Mishra's Factory, Mishra's Workshop, and Strip Mine. So that's all I would add out of this set. Definitely feels kind of antiquated in lieu of a lot of much better cards that have come out since. But that's it for this show. Again, any questions, comments, suggestions, leave them in the YouTube comments. And I want to thank you much for listening. Have a good time.
Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe. It really helps us out. You can find us on Twitter at MagicGathStrat, Facebook magicgatheringstrat, or on the web, magicgatheringstrat.com. There you can find articles and free prize-supported leagues. This is all brought to you by our Patreons and cardhoarder.com. If you enjoyed this content, please consider supporting us at patreon.com/magicgatheringstrat.